Hey everyone, welcome to the Entry Point Hunting Podcast. I am your host, Justina Lee Stoltz, and today I am excited to have a special guest on to chat with us about all things sheep. Pete grew up in a hunting family and he was following in his father's and Opa's footsteps before him. Like many, he started chasing small game before graduating to deer, bears, and moose in his teenage years. And he has since explored most of the adventures BC offers from a hunting standpoint and has recently taken up guiding in the Northwest Territories as a part time job. In addition to hunting, he has been a strong advocate for conservation, serving as a director with the Wild Sheep Society of BC for the past 6 years. Welcome to the show, Pete. Hello.
Thanks, Justina. Great to be on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I am excited today to talk all things sheep because it's an area that I don't know a ton about as a relatively new hunter. So I'm hoping to get a major education that is for me and also for the audience listening today.
Yeah, you betcha. As the intro alluded to there, I've been involved with the Sheep Society for the past 6 years here, and certainly don't know everything there is to know about sheep. I'm learning new things every day too, but happy to be able to share what little I do know about them.
Oh, your little is a lot. You're a humble guy, but I know that you are a wealth of sheep knowledge. So we're gonna hopefully pull some of that out today. But before we do that, maybe dive a little bit into your background. So, I mean, I didn't grow up in a hunting family. You sound like you did. So, what's that experience like? Like as a kid, were you following around dad or your opa or both of them? Like, tell us a bit about what that means to grow up in a hunting family.
Yeah, so mostly was following my dad around. So my opa or grandfather lived back in Germany. My dad grew up learning from him in Germany, and then he moved here in the '70s. And when myself and one of my younger brothers came along, we started towing around with dad, and um, you know, very rarely were we successful in the early days, but we were always kind of out there learning some things. Finding some grouse here and there and some rabbits, and that's kind of really what it started for me. And then again, yeah, it's kind of eventually graduated into some bigger stuff in my mid teenage years, but
And
it was
so,
mostly just oh,
sorry,
go
just
ahead.
to jump in there and go back a step. So, your dad grew up hunting with your opa in Germany. Is that right?
Yeah, you betcha. So
Okay.
my opa was he was a professional forester working for the government of West Germany at the time, and
Cool.
he was kind of managing an area, a small area by Canadian standards, but
Yeah.
a small area where he was managing red deer and roe deer, wild
Oh, wow.
boar, foxes, and birds, and then also the forestry aspect of it, so the harvesting of lumber and that kind of stuff.
Cool. That's neat. And then so did he come over to Canada and then start the family here, or was your dad sort of the first generation here to start hunting here?
Yeah, my mom and dad moved over, and they got married kind of in and around 20 years old, and they moved over here pretty quickly after that.
Cool.
And so yeah, grandparents were all back in Germany. Mom and dad were here, kind of barely spoke a word of English, and
Yeah.
just figured it out. And yeah, they were both self-employed, and so just kind of forged a new life for themselves. And the big driver for that on my dad's side for sure was the outdoors and
Mm.
the allure of Canada at the time. And
Yeah, the great land full of forests and bears and lions and tigers and all that stuff.
yeah, you betcha.
Okay, and so then I guess maybe give us a bit of an insight into what your journey was hunting. Like you ended up being kind of the sheep guy that everybody knows as the sheep guy. Um, but how did you get there? What was the interest that drew you towards sheep, and where did that come in your hunting journey? As far as obviously you said small game, then as the natural progression goes into larger game in your teen years, and then when did you start getting into harder game stuff that's not just wandering around in the woods and more readily easily to find?
Yeah, so I grew up in North Vancouver, and so I spent the first 2 decades of my life there. And hunting for me at that time was really like getting out on the weekend here and there, that kind of deal. But I was fortunate enough to have my dad bought 5 acres of land up in the Chilcotin, and so we
Nice.
spent a good portion of our summers up there as kids each year, and always in that. Um, that last week of August, first couple days of September, that was when the mule deer season would open up. And
Mm.
so we kind of got into mountain hunting for mule deer, doing that like right before school started each year. And
Cool.
so we would go for a few days, whatever we could pull off. Some years were better than others, depending on when Labor Day was falling.
Yeah.
But it was that was really got us into the mountains, and then we ended up doing a couple of mountain goat hunts that were tied to those early season alpine mule deer hunts at the same time.
Yeah.
I progressed into, well, I guess so that was my entrance to the mountain stuff. After that, I kind of got into elk and um, exploring, that kind of stuff, checking out some different mountains because I went to the same ones for 10 years almost before I really went anywhere else.
Yeah.
Um, and then I progressed into sheep after I moved out of Vancouver. So I moved to
Mm.
Penticton with my family, my wife and two kids, and a dog who's barking in the
Yeah.
background right now. Um, yeah. So moved out here in 2015, and then there's bighorn sheep, basically right in town.
Yeah, hanging out
Um,
on the side of the highway.
you betcha. And so that was, seeing them for a couple of years was pretty neat. I didn't really know much about sheep at the time. I knew, through looking at the regulations that there's not a lot of sheep hunting in the southern part of BC.
Mhm.
Um, and ended up going on a stone sheep hunt in 2017. Um, and again, didn't really know anybody in the sheep hunting world at that point. A few friends that were doing it here and there, but um, ended up doing a hunt with kind of a mutual a friend of a friend, essentially, and he was in the same boat as I was, didn't really know anybody, and so it was essentially like a mountain blind date for 12 days, where
Nice.
we'd met each other literally twice before this hunt happened, and it was, for we grabbed a dinner and beers to get to know each other one night. He lives in Cranbrook and I'm out here in the Okanagan, so not that close together.
Yeah.
But yeah, met up a couple times and then went on this hunt, and I really just fell in love with the northern mountains and sheep
With
hunting
hunting,
through
not with
that.
him.
Yeah, you betcha.
That's a
Yeah,
long first date, you know? Usually first dates are like a couple hours, not 12 days.
yeah, you betcha. And so it was eye opening for me. He had done more mountain hunting. He'd done a bunch of goat hunts before,
Mm.
um, and as had I, but he lived up in Terrace and kind of was more accustomed to the um, northern hunting and getting really remote compared to what I was used to at the time.
Mm.
And so yeah, we just went on planned this big adventure. It would, both put our work into it before we left, and uh, crossed our T's and dotted our I's, and kind of really had this plan in place of what we were going to go do, and then went out and tried to accomplish it. And fortunately, we were successful, and he was able to
Nice.
harvest a nice 9-year-old ram, kind of quite late in the hunt, and had a big epic pack back out to a boat to get us back out to
Oh,
the
wow.
highway. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it was just this grand adventure that really lit the fire for me on the sheep side of things.
Yeah, it's I noted that you said later in the hunt. That's always like that mental fortitude game of can you last long enough to actually harvest something during your time. Yeah, I've the last few years I've been on moose and elk hunts that have been 7 to 10 days each, and have yet to still to harvest one of those elusive animals. But yeah, it's amazing how much vigor you can have in the first few days, and then you start questioning everything in life by the midway through it, and then by the end of it, you're like, just anything. Even I just want to see the butt end of a deer running away would be fine. Like, just anything in the woods would be great.
Yeah, you betcha. It can be frustrating at times, and I'm now blessed with having enough experience over the years of doing this, kind of pouring myself into this and doing it a ton, that you come to realize that there's just ebbs and flows to hunting, right?
Mhm.
You can have day after day sometimes where you're seeing all kinds of animals and you're like, man, I have so much luck on my side right now. It's unreal. And then you can have the flip of that and you can go a week without seeing anything. And you're like, I must be doing absolutely everything wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's kind of just how it goes. Like, yeah, you need to maybe put yourself in the right places and do the right things and stuff like that. But even when you do all the things right, you can still have no luck for
Yeah.
for multiple
Yeah.
days in a row. So
There is
yeah.
an element of luck for sure. Um, and so In your so you did that big hunt in 2017 and it kind of got you hooked onto it. What led from say just the hunting aspect of things and wanting to harvest animals to then leading into the conservation? Because you have stepped into uh a very large advocacy role within the Wild Sheep Society. So tell me a bit about what drew you in there and what the connection was.
Yeah, so after that hunt, I kind of just started looking into sheep stuff more, right? And I knew about the Wild Sheep Society of BC prior to going on that hunt. I was a member for a couple of years already, just because I'd heard that they were doing pretty good work
Mhm.
for conservation in the province, and going back to my Opa being a forester in Germany, conservation that was his job, and
Yeah.
so it was kind of in me, although I never was involved in it up until that point in my life, but after coming back from that hunt, I just started looking into things more and more. I discovered that the president of the society at the time, Rodney Zeman, he lives down in Oliver, and I just reached out to him and kind of just said, very naively, like, "Hey, I'm interested. I want to do something. What can I help you with?" Blah blah blah. And at the time, there was sheep that were captured and in a pen on Penticton Indian band land here in
Mm.
town, and so that was for a disease project, or a Seroptes mange project, basically. So these sheep were captured in these pens, and there was a PhD student doing his PhD study, testing a drug to try to cure these sheep or fix these sheep from this disease.
Oh wow.
And so part of that was that the sheep being in pens needed to be fed food, and they needed water, especially in winter, because that's when the water would freeze up, and uh, not a lot of food when you got 15 sheep stuck in a 5 acre pen. And so
Yeah.
um, that ended up being my kind of into the society, and that he was doing that feeding and watering, 1 day a week, and it was a big group effort, obviously, to do that kind of thing. But he'd been doing it for like a year, and he was like, my wife is kind of sick of me every Wednesday night not coming home for dinner, and all these things. And I was like, hey, well, I want to do it. I'm 10 minutes away from this pen, or 5 minutes away from this pen, so I'd
Nice.
love to take it over. And that was my start to things. I took my oldest son Wyatt out, who was 6 at the time,
Mm.
um, and we would go out once a week and go feed the sheep. And
Nice.
it was just a really cool thing to do. Just super rewarding to get to go in there and, yeah, just hang out with these sheep for 10 minutes, once a week, and
Yeah.
ensure that they had water, and ensure that they got some grains and some hay, um, and yeah, just time spent with my son. So it was super rewarding, and yeah, that was the entrance to things.
Did you find in even those short encounters with the sheep that were in a pen, so obviously not quite out in the wild, but did you find that you gleaned any insight into sort of their behaviors or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know anything about sheep at that time, and
Mm.
so obviously they're a pretty social animal, and so going in there, you kind of got to learn about some of those sheep as individuals, and then just see the dynamic of the herd, right? And so
Mm.
because they had ear tags and stuff, so you could differentiate, like, oh, this is you number 37 or
Yeah.
whatever, right? and
Yeah.
and and
Did you name
so
them all?
no, I didn't get into that. But it was neat to see, like, okay, there's always like this one or two ewes that were if I brought the food out, you lay it out there in the spot, and then you just back off and you give them space to do their thing. You don't sit there, up close to it.
Yeah.
But but you put the food on, it's always the same two ewes that would come out right away. They're like, "Yep, I'm not really afraid of you. I know you're here to feed me, and I'm hungry, and I'm going to get into this before the rest of the group does."
Yeah.
And there was always a few that were, very tentative and wouldn't come in till the very, very end. And
Mm.
so yeah, just the individual behaviors of animals, right? Even though they're all the same animal, they're all just bighorn sheep, but they all have their own
Character.
pecu- characters and peculiarities, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's neat. And so from there, you progressed into like what's your title role now within
So
Wild Sheep Society?
yeah, so I'm a director, and so our board has 14 directors, and
Mm.
then of that, 8 of us are just directors, and then there's a further 6 of us who are on the executive board.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so I'm just in a director role. that's where I've been for the last 6 years. I'm pretty content with that for the time being.
Yeah.
It's already a big time commitment, and
Hmm.
I just can only applaud the guys that are uh, further up the rung than I am,
Hmm.
because it's a ton of work at this stage, and we've grown immensely over the years that I've been involved. And yeah, it just seems to be more and more work with each passing year. So
Yeah. Yeah. How big is the Wild Sheep Society now? What's the membership base? Do you know?
yeah, we're currently a little over 1,500 members.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so pretty big growth, and I think when I joined up um, in the director position there 6 years ago, we were kind of closer to 500 at the time,
Mm.
and so we've grown quite a bit. We've got like a life membership tier, and then beyond that, monarch membership. So just different levels of some guys just have the money to spend or want to spend it, and
Hmm.
um, it gets put to a good cause. And so we have these different memberships, and so at this point we're kind of batting right around 50% on our life membership. So of those 1,500,
Wow.
we're well over 700 life members already, and
Amazing.
um, yeah, even our monarch membership I think it's a little bit over 150 now at this stage. So it's pretty remarkable to see, and it definitely uh, stokes the fire for all of us that are giving our time towards it to see that much growth and that much generosity from people.
Yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm and people that are of concern and interest of what's happening. So maybe this would be a good spot to talk a little bit about what does the Wild Sheep Society do for those that don't know.
Yeah, so we're a conservation organization that's kind of looking out for, or trying to look out for wild sheep here in
Mm.
BC. And so, for anyone that doesn't know too much about wild sheep, we have four different subspecies here in British Columbia. So there's a California bighorn sheep, which is here in the Okanagan, Kamloops Lake area, and then up the Fraser River and into the Chilcotin. We've got Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep out in the Kootenays, and even to the Northern Rockies, kind of just south of Dawson Creek area. There's also a little small population of Rockies at Spence's Bridge. And then in the northern part of the province, we have stone sheep and Dall sheep.
Hmm.
And so yeah, our role is basically we're looking to put money on the ground into projects that will benefit wild sheep, and we're an advocacy group for wild sheep. And so um, they got a whole host of issues. um,
That was going to be
some
my
of them
next
are
question. So tell
yeah.
us what the problems are. Like, what would a boots on the ground project for sheep look like?
So totally varies, and even within a subspecies, herd to herd. Um, here in the Okanagan, disease is the primary issue. So there's multiple diseases that the wild sheep are facing here in the valley. Along the Fraser, they've got some of the same disease issues. So MOVI or Mycoplasma ovinemoniae is
Hmm.
is one of the big ones, and so that's basically uh, a bacteria um, that uh, sorry, losing my train of thought here. It's a um, pneumonia bacteria
Hmm.
that they basically contract from, or have contracted at some point in time, from a domestic sheep. And
Mm.
so domestic sheep being raised and bred in captivity for thousands of years at this point by humans have this disease, but it doesn't really affect them to the same degree that it does to a naive animal, so a wild sheep in this case. And
Mm.
so when they do contracted, and again they're social animals, so you could have literally one farmer somewhere out in wild sheep country that has a couple of sheep that they just like the sheep, and nothing wrong with that. But if those sheep have a disease, and if they come in contact with the wild sheep, and usually during the rut is when something like that would occur,
Mm.
they pass it along, and then it can really destroy the population of that wild sheep. And so
Interesting. So you that the domestic sheep have Movi, and I mean, my brain immediately wants to know, like, do we know where this came from? Is it a yeah? Do we know where it came from?
I mean, I don't know all of the history of Movi itself, but I know that it's been in domestic sheep for of years, if not 1,000 or more years at this
And so
point.
the
And so
and so the domestic
th-
sheep have it, and they have become immune or acclimatized or less affected. But because it's not naturally found in the wild, when wild sheep come into contact with it, what does it do to the sheep, the wild sheep?
Yeah, so basically it's the movie itself doesn't kill them, but it's basically a it to get kind of a little scientific about it, it hampers the cilia in the trachea, so the little hairs that are on the edges of your trachea.
Mhm.
It causes a bunch of mucus to form around them and inhibits their ability to defend against other things. And so what the sheep end up getting for the most part is pneumonia, and they end up dying from that more often than
Oh.
not. And so what you see when a herd contracts this, and again they're super social, so one animal could get it, say in a group of ewes. Um, One ewe gets it from a domestic sheep, brings it in, spreads it out throughout the herd, and then you'll get a typically a big population collapse right away. And
Mm.
then the further ripple effect of that is that each year, as the ewes are bred and then give birth to their lambs, they'll then give the movie to the lambs. And so what you
Mm.
see, and we're experiencing this in the Okanagan right now, and have been for the last 3 years, is that um, the lambs are born, they contract the movie from their mums, and then they all die, or the vast majority of
Oh,
them die within the first 6 to 8 weeks, typically of life. And
wow.
so, and it's been on this, so it's been around for a number of years, or probably longer than we actually really know. The science is catching
Mm.
up to it in the last few years here, really.
Mm.
But we had a big die off in the Vaso Lake herd back in the late 90s. The populations kind of swung back up until recently, and then 3 years ago they got it again, and
Mm.
so a big population collapse again. For the last 3 years, we're kind of sitting in that like 10 to 15% lamb
Wow.
survival, which and it's not like lambs are always going to die in the first year,
Yeah.
um, from a variety of things, right?
Mm.
Winter predation. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of things that can cause this, but they shouldn't be dying from a disease in the first, you know, month to 2 months of their life, right? And so that's where the
Mhm.
movie really has a negative impact on their populations.
And so we're not seeing like I'm so curious as to, and I'm sorry if I'm going super nitty gritty into this, but if the domestic populations seem to be surviving and okay, w- why are we not seeing any sort of adaptation in the wild populations?
I,
Do we
I
or
think
do
we
we know why the domestic ones are surviving with it?
I think I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I'm only speaking on what I have learned about this disease over the last few years.
Mhm.
But um, the domestics, they'll carry it, right? And so it'll still affect the sheep. They'll still so quite frequently, like their body condition will not be as good. They'll be a little bit smaller than they maybe should be,
Mhm.
kind of things of that nature, right? But they don't necessarily die from it.
Mhm.
Um, they've had hundreds, or maybe again 1,000 years or so of living with this and growing immunity towards it to be able to get to this point that they're now at, right? And
Mhm.
so the same is probably occurring with bighorn sheep, and thinhorn sheep they could be affected by this too currently, and knock on wood, they don't get this. It's again,
Oh, interesting.
it's because just because they live further away from humans, essentially,
Yeah. Yeah.
is all it comes down to, right? But it's kind of the biggest fear of wildlife managers and scientists within the wild sheep world, is that that Movi could get into stone sheep or doll sheep,
Mm.
because almost all of those populations are interconnected between BC, Yukon, and WT, and Alaska. And so if any of them got it, it could potentially spread to everything, and that would
Mhm.
be pretty catastrophic. And so um, yeah, it's just I think, I would assume anyway, that the bighorn sheep that have contracted this over the years are slowly building immunity to it.
Mhm.
Again, like as we learned with COVID the last few years, there's different strains. There's different, there's differences. One of them
Mm.
makes you cough more. One of them makes some other symptom more prevalent, whatever it might be. And
Mhm.
so um, it would depend on the strain probably, but I think overall, the sheep are developing an immunity. It just might take us 500 years for them to be able to handle it, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm. If
that's
and
that's
hopefully they survive through that. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least, the silver lining is at least they're slightly better off than deer with CWD, There at least there's a hope that the sheep populations will be able to adapt and become immune, or at least learn to live with it. Whereas it's not quite the case so far with CWD on the cervid population. Um, so along the lines of Moby, and I do want to come back to the original question about what projects the Wild Sheep Society is doing and what conservation on the ground looks like for that. But just to touch with Moby for a minute, is there any indication that hunters who harvest animals that have Moby, if perhaps it's not further advanced into its progression at that time, is that meat contaminated and can it transfer to humans, or is that something that humans need to be concerned about?
No, that's totally safe. So
Mm.
you can't contract it through the meat. And even so, a project we've done. I've got a picture right behind me here from that's a couple of bighorn sheep getting slung with a helicopter. That's from the Fraser River from a Movi project that
Mm.
we've been doing the last few years. But um, absolutely safe to eat. It doesn't affect anything like that. You couldn't contract the disease from them by somehow crossing their snot or something like that because it's all within
Yeah,
the
any
in that kind
fluids,
of
yeah.
system. Yeah, you're not gonna catch Movi as a human. um,
Interesting, okay.
and there's nothing wrong with the meat whatsoever. Totally safe. We did in the for a couple of years anyway. The province was doing a hunter testing program, and they've done this in other jurisdictions as well. They were just finding that a lot of the samples were not really usable, and that's just because of the remoteness of sheep, right? If you
Mhm,
try to, it's the same test as like a COVID test, right? It's
yeah.
a big Q-tip, shoving it up the sheep's nose and
Mm,
doing a swab, but you need to try to keep it, you want to get it frozen essentially within the first few hours of doing that. And when you're on a
mhm.
backpack hunt somewhere in the middle of nowhere and not going to get home for 4 days,
No.
it's kind of hard to keep that sample in any kind of condition that's good for scientific use.
Yeah,
Um, s-
yeah.
so they backed off of that. But yeah, no, totally harmless to humans, on Movi at least. Some of the
And
other diseases we don't know as much about, but
yeah, and with Movi, would a hunter know if they were trying to harvest an animal that had contracted already? Like, are there observable symptoms?
in the very later stages, I'd say, yeah, they would just have like a weaker body condition. They might have essentially like a runny nose.
Mm,
And I've seen this through that Fraser River project where we were capturing a bunch of sheep, many of them which were sick. You would see that some of them definitely had a lot of fluids coming out of the nostrils and things like
mhm.
that. But observing it through a spotting scope or something like that, like probably a little bit
Yeah,
harder,
probably not.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, compared to like the Seroptes disease I spoke of earlier, like that one you can tell when an animal has that. Movi, not as much.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Um, so let's circle back to projects that Wild Sheep Society is working on now. So what are the pressing issues? What are the things that the Wild Sheep Society is looking to address sooner rather than later?
Yeah, so I'd say, I mean, disease mitigation is a huge one for certainly for the bighorn sheep. So be that in the Kootenays or in the Okanagan, and then preventing that from ever happening up in northern BC.
Hmm.
That's one. Habitat is, like any wildlife, habitat is essential. And so uh, we've got a lot of funding tied up in northern BC for prescription fire. It's just difficult to get that going. Would be that, government regulations, things of that nature, or just Mother Nature causing
Hmm.
causing those kind of windows to be few and far between.
Hmm.
But those are big ones. We do a lot of work on studying different things, whether that be with the uh, Ministry of BC staff or students doing a master's or PhD studies. We've got a lot of stuff tied up there, and then kind of just general advocacy as well. Trying to raise awareness, certainly around the disease issues, but we kind of try to tackle anything and everything that we can, and
Hmm.
um, it used to be a few years ago we would be kind of trying to come up with projects of our own to do, and now we've got our own projects that we like to do, but we're also very kind of uh, I guess we're attracting attention from a lot of other people within the industry that they're now coming to us with projects that they're looking to do, and that's been a
Hmm.
cool
Partnerships.
a,
Yeah.
a, a cool growth for us where we're now like, oh, we've gotten pretty good at fundraising and figuring out that side of the equation, and now we can rely on somebody over in this place or in that place to tell us, hey, this is the issue that our herd of sheep is facing.
Hmm.
Can you help us out in some way? And so um, yeah, be that with First Nations or with local rod and gun clubs. We're kind of trying to create partnerships everywhere that we can in the province, and
Yeah.
just try to do good work for sheep. And we're really conscious of um, putting our money into projects that actually make a difference versus
Yeah.
just kind of throwing it out there and letting it essentially go to waste.
Hmm. Hmm. Are there any projects that um, regular civilians or things that regular people could be doing that would have a conservation aspect towards sheep habitats or helping with any of that kind of stuff? Like, what would be your suggestion to the average person?
Yeah, no, it's pretty hard. Like, I was very fortunate and unique to get into my little feeding role there when I first jumped into
Hmm.
things. Um, we've got so one of our kind of flagship projects the last few years has been this Fraser River Movi cleanup essentially, and so for that we're trying to capture almost every sheep that lives within this meta population of, yeah, it's about
Wow.
1,000 sheep or so. We're, I think, 5 years into it at this point.
Hmm.
Have captured a whole bunch of sheep, but for the most part, it's all like helicopter net gunning. You're
Wow.
not. It's not something I get to be a part of, or anyone else really. And we were really hoping this winter, and we tried last winter as well, to do a drop net capture
Mm.
in one of the places along the Fraser that it's actually feasible to do that. And so for that, we would need about 100 volunteers,
Oh, wow.
and we were all
So
set up
what
for it
does
to.
that mean? What is a drop net catcher when you say that?
Yeah, so it's basically building a corral essentially, and there's a big net that sits above the whole corral, and so you put feed into the corral, and you get the sheep to get accustomed to it and come in, and ideally you drop the net on them
Hmm.
when there's enough of them in there and you have enough people to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so, but then yeah, you basically just drop the net, you capture all the sheep at once, you test them all right then and there, and then you release them. And so um,
And so
for
is
this.
that what the project is doing, is capturing and testing, or are they collaring them as well, or?
So a bit of collaring. We kind of started out collaring them first to kind of figure out where the sheep are and kind of build the framework for being able to then capture them all.
Mhm.
But it's a test and remove project, so it's testing them. Any sheep that tests positive for Movi, we're euthanizing, and
Wow.
yeah, so pretty harsh work. The
Mhm.
first year we did it, I was able to get out for that, and in a herd of 46 sheep that we captured over about 5 days,
Mhm.
12 of them ended up testing positive,
Oh, wow.
and so we removed almost 25% of the herd essentially.
Mhm.
Um, but that
So
was a
not
herd
all
that.
of them.
No, and so
Interesting.
some will have had it, but they'll no longer be carrying and being able
Mm.
to spread the disease. They'll get it, they'll survive, and then they'll carry on with life.
Mhm.
Others just don't seem to contract it at all, and others will contract it and then carry it and shed it to
Mm.
to others around them. And so we're really focusing on these sheep that were actively shedding this virus still, or this bacteria, and we're able to pass it on to other ones. And so yeah, in removing these 12 ewes, one was a young lamb, so 11 ewes and one young lamb.
Mhm.
Um, Removing them from the population, it put a big dent in that population that year.
Mhm.
But that same population was having zero lambs. It was documented for 3 years previous to that they didn't have a single
Wow.
lamb amongst 40 plus ewes.
Wow.
And the next year after we did this work, and we did it in um, late February, but basically that spring, the remaining ewes all had their lambs, and all their lambs lived and survived the
Oh,
period that
wow.
they typically would have died. And so, in a 1 year period, you already had more sheep than
Mhm.
than you had before you had to remove those animals, and
Yeah.
then they keep growing from there, right? So each successive year they've had their lambs again, and that population is, I don't want to say it's thriving now, but
We're
it's
recovering.
it's in far better shape than it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And so
amazing. That's
yeah,
nice
so
to see.
that
That was gonna be my next question is like, what happened? What's the end of the story? You wanna know that it actually works to be doing that.
yeah, so the end is still not there, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the advocacy is part of what we do too, and um, all this work that we're pouring into these Fraser River California bighorns is to try to clean them up of this disease. But
Mhm.
at the government level, there's still nothing that exists, and uh, as far as
Really?
laws or legislature goes, that prevents. So, couple things, right? And I'm not trying to pick on domestic sheep owners or producers or anything like that at all.
Mhm.
It's just something to be aware of, right? There's nothing right now legally that says you can't own domestic sheep right on the Fraser River where there's all these wild sheep, and there's
Mhm.
nothing that says that you need to test your domestic sheep for this
Mm.
disease that we know about, right? And
Wow.
so that's what we're kind of trying to push for, and we've been working with um, certainly Okanagan Nation Alliance here in the Okanagan, the Silcotin Nation, and a few other ones as well. We're kind of really trying to spread awareness about this, and I don't know what the end solution is that we would necessarily want to seek, but essentially
Well,
we want to
testing at
try
the
to,
very least.
well, at the very least, right? It's really like, we know this disease exists, we
Yeah.
know what happens to the wild sheep when they get it.
Yeah.
Why would we not do something that
But
could
yeah, I
prevent the
mean,
deaths of hundreds of animals, right?
yeah, the
Every year.
very minimum testing, like
Yeah.
that's mind-blowing to me that you can have sh domestic sheep populations that have no requirement to test. Like, you think as a farmer, you'd wanna know that, um, to control your own populations and not have ill animals within your own herd, so that's mind-boggling to me that that's not a requirement given the severity of this disease.
Yeah, you betcha. So part of this Fraser River project, we did filming for made a documentary film that first year. It's readily available on YouTube. You can just look up transmission, and
Mhm.
then wild sheep. If you put those words together on a Google search, you'll find this film. It's about 50 minutes long for a runtime, but
Mhm.
it really dives into that issue. It dives into, we worked with a domestic producer from the Kootenays, and they had Movi within their domestic flock, and so we really just dove into the issue and into the challenges associated with this disease on that one. So for anybody that's
Mhm.
looking to kind of just learn some more, it's you'll get more education, and from people that are far better able to speak to it than I am.
Yeah, I'll
From
make
the
sure I put that link to the film into the show notes as well, because yeah, it's a well put together film that is very comprehensive and gives a really good perspective of what it is and what's happening. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on something. I don't know, like you said, what the end goal will be for domestic farmers, but at the very least, there should be a push for testing.
Yeah, I'd love to see it personally. I mean, I feel like it's pretty tragic that we know this exists, and that year after year we're seeing literally hundreds of animals dying from this when they
Mhm.
don't have to, right? That's
Yeah,
to to me, it's pretty heartbreaking.
unnecessary. Yeah. What was the other primary disease that you had mentioned outside of Moby? There was another one. Oh, did
Um,
I lose you?
oh, I'm back again. It went black for a second there. Do you got me?
Yeah. I got you
Yeah.
now. Yeah, you blacked out there for a sec.
Okay. Yeah. So seroptic mange, or seroptes, is the other disease, and it's specific to sheep on the western side of Okanagan Valley.
Hmm.
It's it's not a naturally occurring disease. It's something that we assume they got it from the old Okanagan game farm that was just
Mm,
outside of Penticton.
mhm,
Um, and we assume that because the specifics of this disease is that they have a rabbit version of it. And so there's no
Oh,
reason why sheep should have a rabbit disease,
yeah.
other than that humans had something to do with it.
Yeah.
And so all the signs kind of point back to the Okanagan Game Farm back in the day.
Mm,
But this disease is basically it's these little tiny mites that live. They live and breed within the ears of the sheep,
mm,
and it's pretty gross. Like they really, I don't know how many would be in an ear, but it's well into the thousands, I would say.
mm,
And so I've seen the sheep that were in these pens that I was feeding, you'd see it, like they have crusty, gross ears. When it gets really bad, it kind of spreads throughout their body, and they'll have, bald patches and all kinds of stuff like that. Um, but so
mm,
it doesn't the disease itself doesn't kill them either, but it really inhibits their ability to, hear things for starters.
mhm.
But then it also probably just stresses them out nonstop to have all this stuff going
Yeah.
on that you can't do anything about. And so
Yeah.
that disease is spread basically throughout the sheep on the western side of the Okanagan, and then all the way
Oh,
into the Ashnola, and that Karamios kind of area. And
yeah.
so all of those sheep, um, they all have it in varying degrees right now, and
Wow.
that's caused just a slow and steady decline. Well, maybe not even that slow, but a steady decline, of those sheep over the last 20 years or so.
Wow. And is there a solution or cure or vaccine or anything that's been
S-
found to combat that?
Yeah, so the PhD study that was done, a number of years ago there, that we did find there was a medicine that they were using at the time, but the unfortunate part about it was that it was an orally administered thing, and so we had to
Mm,
like tie down the
catch
sheep
them.
essentially
Yeah.
and force feed it this pill or this
Mhm.
pellet, ensure that it swallowed it and took it in. That was working pretty good, but
Mm.
how you do that in a
Large
large area
scale.
setting, and
Yeah.
how do you ensure that you capture every single sheep and do it to every single one?
Yeah.
They haven't figured that one out yet. And so, um, we're in the process right now, and Okanagan Nation Alliance is kind of leading the charge on this one as well. But we're in the process of, um, working to test on there's a new drug that's come out since. We're just haven't been able to get things off the ground quite yet with it. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of work being done in the background currently on this one to hopefully tackle this issue again in the next couple of years, and try to rid these sheep of this disease that they just have no business having in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Okay. Um, are there, outside of, say, disease, are there other pressing issues that Wild Sheep Society is working on and would need public help on? Like, I know bodies can be really important in making sure that the work can actually occur and happen. Is there anything that you guys would want help with, or call to the public for anything?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a couple of sheep counts that we do in certain areas of the province. We do also, we're not super organized on it right now, but we've done kind of working groups for habitat enhancement in the past. So, uh, tree thinning and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff, where we're really just looking to enhance the habitat in certain areas. So we've done that out in the Kootenays, we've done that in the Okanagan. We're looking to do some more of that again moving forward. Those are really the only projects we can kind of get people involved in. And
Mhm.
then the sheep counts is really like an inventory. We're helping the wildlife biologists to just gather their inventory on things when we do those. So, it's maybe not having a hugely impactful benefit to those sheep, but it is maybe saving a few $1,000s for someone to fly around in a helicopter or airplane instead,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it does make a difference, and it also just it's a great tool to get people out in the outdoors and go look at some wildlife and chat with like-minded folk. And so we always have kind of a really good time when we do those kinds of events.
Yeah.
And those working groups are the same, right? You typically will go out and you'll work for the better part of a day, but we'll have a luncheon of some form or barbecue or whatever. And it's
Mhm.
just, yeah, you can, if you're a parent, you can bring your kids along and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, in my opinion, it's time well spent.
Yeah. It's community and creating a community and culture around a good cause. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, what do you one of our last questions here, and then I'm going to throw some rapid fire at you. But what do you think the hunting world and the sheep world is going to look like in the future, like for the next generation? What's your crystal ball prediction around that?
Um, I mean, if I look at history and again, so I grew up hunting.
Hmm.
I grew up like as a kid, I was fascinated with the regulation synopsis and was like, I'm checking out all these seasons and places and stuff that I don't know anything about because I didn't have
Hmm.
internet at the time. But um, there's been a steady decline in opportunity for hunting
Mm.
kind of throughout the province for pretty much every species. So I I don't mean to be negative with this, but I foresee that continuing. I don't see
Hmm.
how that's going to change if there's more people out there doing things, and I don't want to try to sway people away from hunting at all. I think it's brought me more joy in my life than pretty much everything else. It's something that I'm
Hmm.
deeply passionate about, and I really think more people should give it a try in their life because they'll probably find that it leads to all kinds of positive benefits in their life if they do it.
Hmm.
But I also think we need to be kind of conscious of how great an opportunity we actually do have here in BC. And I've learned that from talking to people that don't live in BC but are into hunting, and they look at
Hmm.
us like, my goodness, you guys have like all of these different species you can chase. You can chase them for months on end. You've got,
Hmm.
really the most liberal seasons out there anywhere.
Yeah, you
And
can go buy
so
tags over the counter. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I mean, I don't know that that's going to continue forever. I don't think it will, right? We've seen changes
Mhm.
in the last few years with moose and caribou hunting up north. We'll probably see more of that over the next few years.
Mhm.
I don't know what it looks like long term. And so for the record, like I've never shot a sheep myself.
Mm. Wow.
I've
I'm
gone multiple
surprised.
times. I just no, my dad shot a stone sheep when I was a kid, and he was fortunate enough to shoot an older ram, and so I grew up looking at that ram, and I just had set in my head that the only ram I'm ever going to shoot, if I ever shoot one, it's got to be an old one. It's
Mm.
just that's just it, and so
Yeah.
um, I hold myself to that standard. It's not that I have to, but I choose to, and I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable with it,
Yeah.
um, and it's something I chat with my son about, and maybe one day when I'm all old and can't do it anymore and didn't accomplish my dream or something, maybe I'll regret it, but I really don't think so,
No.
because I'll still have spent a bunch of time out there pursuing it
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
I really appreciate you sharing that and saying that because I I've only been into the hunting world actively pursuing in the last 3 years, and one of the things that one of my mentors said to me is he said, you choose what kind of hunter you want to be. And you can choose to shoot whatever comes your way, or you can be selective about what you shoot. And he wasn't saying it in the sense of a trophy or anything like that. But he said, if you shoot every young buck out there that you see, you'll never see an old buck because they're going to shoot them all. So there's a choice to allow an animal to age. And I mean, obviously, there's other hunters out there who will shoot whatever they want and whatever age, and you may not see that same animal again the next year. But um, I choose also actively to not shoot young bucks. If I see them, I'd rather shoot a buck that's already had a chance to live. Obviously, talking about deer in this scenario, but yeah, just choosing what you shoot and having a reason for it, I think is a good thing.
no, 100%, right? Is there's the way I look at it is like I've never really had a bad day out in the field. I've had
No,
things go sideways and stuff like that,
frustrating
and
days.
for
Yeah,
sure, but it's always time well spent when I'm out there. It's
yeah,
always I've if at worst case scenario, I learned something that
yeah,
day. Like,
yeah. Or
may
worst case scenario, at least got some exercise. Hopefully.
yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, and to what your point there, I mean, there's some hunts I do shoot the first thing that I'm come across because that's
Yeah,
what I'm in it for, right? And
yeah.
I've got a young family at home. Well, not that young anymore, but I've got mouths to
Growing
feed here,
family.
and so
Yeah.
there's certain times like when I go out, on a moose hunt and I've got a limited entry moose tag, like I'm shooting the first legal bull I see, and
Oh,
I've
yeah.
to this
Yeah.
to this day
Those are
I
very
haven't.
select things.
Well, it's a that hunt is very much a meat hunt for me. It's not.
Yeah.
I couldn't care less what the size of the antlers are. If it is a
Yeah.
legal animal, I'm shooting that one. But
Yeah.
other hunts, it's like no, I'm in it for the adventure, or I'm in it for the challenge, or whatever it might be. And if I'm not quote unquote successful in cutting my tag, it's still a successful hunt to me at the end of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Success is defined in many, many ways in the hunting world, and it's not always just about the harvest. Yeah, as somebody who's in my third year and have yet to harvest a large game animal, only small game, um, I haven't had a bad season yet. It's always been a learning and an adventurous time, and you learn and get to see and be on the land, and just you gain that experience. It's knowledge that you wouldn't have, especially for me not growing up in a hunting family. Every time I'm out in the woods, it's kind of like being a kid. Is you're just learning so much that you don't even know that you don't know until you're out there.
oh yeah, you betcha. And I've been doing it for a long time now, and I still learn things every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, let's hop into our rapid fire, and I'll be mindful of your time here. So these questions are a series of quick questions, so quick answers. You don't have to dive too deep into them. What was the first animal that you ever harvested? The very, very first one.
First one would have been a ruffed grouse.
Nice. Yeah, I think mine was too. What should you never do in the hunting woods?
I would say just be conscious of being out there, right? So like littering, things of that nature. Like for me, I'm very much like when I enter the woods, I want to leave them as they were, right?
Hmm.
Leave as minimal. If I'm leaving anything, it's a gut pile,
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
So don't leave your garbage. What is your favorite hunting resource? Whether that's a podcast, a book, a forum, anything.
Whew, that's changed over the years. I think right now my resource would be my friends within the hunting realm. I
Yeah.
it's your friends and family. But over the years back, like so back in the day, hunting BC forum used to be a pretty
Hmm.
good resource. Now not so much. But um, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. I've got a pretty healthy bookshelf as well. So a lot of books that I've just picked up over the years. Yeah, there's a lot of info out there.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite hunting snack?
Um, that's a tough one. I would say jerky of any form.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Good protein, good salt. Are you double socks or one layer of socks?
One layer of socks. I've contemplated doubles for a while, but never done it.
Good. You might have to try it one day. You never know.
Yeah,
Uh, do you have a lucky item that you take hunting with you?
I do. I have a hunting hat, a lucky hunting hat that is pretty gross at this
Ah,
point, but I yeah,
yeah, no
and I
kidding.
and I actually left it at my cabin this past fall. I was up there right after I came back from guiding, left it there, and then had I had a limited entry Roosevelt elk tag this past fall. Didn't have my lucky hunting hat for it, and I did not cut a tag.
Oh
And
no, they're
I
correlated.
partially yeah, no, it's a thing for sure.
Oh man, did you get it back?
No, yeah, I picked it up. Actually, I was up there 2 weeks ago, and I picked it up, and I saw it again. It was right where I left it, obviously, and I was like,
Oh,
"Ah,
good.
yes, okay, it still exists. I'm good. I'm good for the
Yeah, yeah,
season."
you're good for the rest of time. Yeah. And lastly, what is the one absolute essential item that you have to have on every hunt other than your lucky hunting hat?
Uh, I'm going to go with the legal option here. Is you need to have your tags and your pal with you.
Yes. Yeah, very critical. Don't want to do anything without those. Well, Pete, thank you so very much. If people want to get a hold of you, where is the best place for them to reach you?
Yeah, so on social media, you can find me on Instagram primarily, just under at Peter Gutsche. I'm on Facebook as well, but I don't really spend a lot of time there. And then yeah, those would be the best two places. You can also probably find my email and phone number and all kinds of stuff if you look on the Wild Sheep Society website enough. But
Yeah.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
easy to
Well,
get a hold of, certainly through social media.
We'll make sure that we have those in the show notes as well. Well, thank you again, Pete, for the education and for letting me grill you and dive deep into some of the nitty gritty details about sheep and the diseases and all the other stuff that the Wild Sheep Society is into. I appreciate you taking the time to share the knowledge and resources that you have.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Justine. It was great pleasure to talk to you today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in today to watch or listen, and make sure to hit that like or subscribe button to follow along wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or reviews, please drop them down below. I will read them and I will get back to you. Or you can reach me at questions@entrypointhunting.com. If you know an expert or someone who offers great advice or is just growing rapidly in the field of hunting, angling, or conservation, please send them my way. I would love to reach out and connect with them. And until next time, friends, stay hungry.